You're LeBron James. You came into the league wearing number 23. Now, eventually, it was to be the GOAT and to be supplanted.
Think about the greatest player of all time, it's still LeBron James in my.
The LeBron versus Jordan debate has been beaten to death for decades, recycled through talk shows, barbershops, and social media timelines until most fans think there is nothing new left to say. But every once in a while, someone drops a truth bomb that forces the conversation to evolve instead of repeat itself. This time, that moment came from Stephen A. Smith, with Kendrick Perkins standing firmly beside him. Their argument isn't about box scores anymore. It's not about rings, points, MVPs, or finals appearances. This conversation cuts deeper. It's about legacy, humility, and whether LeBron James ever truly wanted to learn from the men who built the road before him. According to Stephen A., LeBron James had a rare opportunity that almost no superstar in sports history has ever had: direct access to the greatest player of all time while still writing his own story. Michael Jordan wasn't a distant legend from black and white footage. He was alive, present, and watching. Yet Stephen A. questions whether LeBron ever sought Jordan's wisdom or guidance, or whether he deliberately chose isolation over mentorship. Was it pride? Was it an obsession with carving out a completely separate identity? Or was it a missed opportunity that quietly shaped how LeBron's legacy would eventually be judged? In today's episode of NBA Showdown, we break down this cold truth in 7 revealing sections. If you think you already know this story, think again. And if you appreciate raw, unfiltered NBA takes, stick around until the end. When LeBron James entered the league, he didn't simply arrive as a highly touted prospect. He arrived carrying expectations that bordered on impossible. From day one, he was branded as the chosen one, not by the media alone, but by the culture of basketball itself. And when he chose to wear the number 23, the number forever immortalized by Michael Jordan, he made a statement that went far beyond fashion or admiration. That decision invited comparison before he ever dribbled an NBA basketball. It was bold, ambitious, and heavy with symbolism that few 18-year-olds could fully comprehend. Stephen A. Smith highlights what that number truly represented in a post-Jordan era. Wearing 23 wasn't just about honoring greatness. It was a declaration. It told the world that LeBron James wasn't here to simply coexist with Jordan's legacy. He was here to challenge it, to climb the same mountain and possibly claim the same throne. But here is where the contradiction begins to take shape. If you are willing to inherit the symbol of a king, shouldn't you also be willing to learn from the king himself? That's the core of the issue. LeBron's early actions suggested he was chasing Jordan's shadow, not walking alongside Jordan's influence. Rather than seeking insight, mentorship, or even conversation with the man who defined excellence for an entire generation, LeBron chose solitude. He chose to figure it out alone, to build his legacy without guidance from the very blueprint he claimed to admire. Wearing 23 sent a message to the world, but what followed suggested a superstar who wanted the crown without ever acknowledging the lessons that came with it. And that contradiction, the bold declaration paired with deliberate distance, is where the quiet rift between LeBron James and Michael Jordan truly began. Not with trash talk, not with criticism, but with silence.
You're LeBron James. You came into the league wearing number 23. Now, eventually, it was to be the GOAT and to be supplanted.
Kendrick Perkins lays it out in the most direct way possible, cutting through years of noise and revisionist history. The never-ending debate between LeBron James and Michael Jordan was not something that simply appeared out of thin air, nor was it manufactured solely by fans or the media. According to Perkins, this rivalry was largely ignited by LeBron himself. From publicly calling himself the greatest of all time in a globally released documentary, to consistently leaning into conversations that framed his career as a direct challenge to Jordan's throne, LeBron didn't just participate in the debate, he fueled it. Every statement, every comparison, every self-assessment added another layer to a narrative that quickly grew bigger than the game itself. By doing so, LeBron created expectations that were impossible to escape. Instead of allowing his legacy to breathe on its own terms, he willingly tied it to the standards set by the most untouchable figure in basketball history. Rather than building a separate lane defined by his own unique dominance, longevity, and versatility, LeBron chose to step into a lane that already had an undisputed king at the end of it. That decision changed everything. Once the comparison was accepted, there was no longer room for context, nuance, or appreciation without judgment. Every finals loss became louder. Every flaw became magnified. Every achievement was filtered through one question. Is this enough to surpass Jordan? The irony, as Perkins points out, is striking. Had LeBron taken a different approach, one rooted in reverence, patience, and genuine curiosity about what made Jordan untouchable, this entire dynamic could have unfolded differently. Collaboration, mentorship, and acknowledgement might have softened the edges of comparison. But instead, LeBron chose confrontation over curiosity. He chose to challenge the myth head-on, and in doing so, created a storm that he now appears frustrated by. Yet that frustration cannot be separated from the choices that led him there. Perkins makes it clear that this is not a case of media manipulation or unfair criticism. This is not fans inventing a rivalry out of boredom. This is self-inflicted narrative pressure. Once LeBron publicly reached for the crown, he invited the world to measure him by the highest possible standard. And once that invitation was sent, there was no turning back. The GOAT War didn't begin in television studios or comment sections. According to Kendrick Perkins, it began the moment LeBron James decided to claim greatness before the basketball world had finished defining it for him.
A lot of this, with far as Jordan and Bron relationship, is self-inflicted by LeBron.
For Kendrick Perkins, the exact moment the relationship between Michael Jordan and LeBron James became strained can be traced back to a single statement. The moment LeBron publicly proclaimed himself the greatest of all time. That moment was not just a soundbite meant to trend on television or spark debate online. It was a declaration that sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Words like that do not exist in a vacuum, especially when they come from a player still actively building his legacy. Around the league, among veterans, former champions, and Hall of Fame legends, the statement did not land as confidence. It landed as disruption. And for the man many still consider the undisputed GOAT, Michael Jordan, it struck at the core of how greatness has always been earned in NBA culture. This was never about personal disrespect. Perkins makes it clear that the issue was tradition. In the NBA, greatness is something that is bestowed, not claimed. It is earned through time, sacrifice, dominance, and ultimately through the acknowledgement of peers who understand the grind better than anyone else. Michael Jordan never had to say he was the greatest because the league said it for him. Kobe Bryant never needed to announce it. Tim Duncan let his rings and consistency speak. Bill Russell let history do the talking. Their silence was not humility alone. It was respect for the process. They trusted that if their greatness was real, it would be recognized without self-promotion that LeBron shattered that unwritten rule. By calling himself the greatest, he bypassed the traditional path of generational validation. He skipped the moment where the elders passed the torch and instead reached up and grabbed it himself. That single act changed how many legends viewed him. Doors that might have opened through patience and humility quietly closed. Not just with Jordan, but with other all-time greats who believe that legacy should be earned through consensus, not claimed through proclamation. In that sense, it wasn't a bridge being built toward Jordan. It was a bridge being burned before it ever fully formed. Perkins doesn't deny LeBron's greatness. In fact, he openly states that LeBron is the greatest in his own eyes. But even he admits that words have weight and that moment carried consequences. It reinforced the perception that LeBron was trying to control the narrative of history instead of allowing history to shape him naturally. Rather than letting time, peers, and generations decide his place, LeBron attempted to define it himself. And in a league built on respect, legacy, and earned acknowledgement, that decision created distance. Not because LeBron lacked greatness, but because he challenged the very process by which greatness has always been recognized.
When Bron self-proclaimed himself as the GOAT, I think right there was the starting point.
Stephen A. Smith is very deliberate in clarifying one thing that often gets lost in the noise of the GOAT debate. Michael Jordan does not hate LeBron James. There is no personal beef, no lingering resentment, no behind-the-scenes feud simmering in silence. What exists instead is something far more telling: distance. A quiet, unmistakable absence of connection. No mentorship, no bond, no shared dialogue between two players whose careers are forever linked by history. And according to Stephen A., that separation is not accidental or coincidental. It is the result of something far deeper than competition. It is the result of a door that was never knocked on. Jordan, as Stephen A. explains, is not sitting around waiting to be acknowledged. He is not chasing relevance, media attention, or validation from today's stars. His legacy is settled. His impact is cemented. He lives comfortably in a space where he owes the game nothing, but the game still owes him everything. Yet within that space exists decades of wisdom, experience, and insight that very few people on Earth possess. Knowledge about pressure, dominance, leadership, and the psychological toll of greatness. And that is what Stephen A. finds puzzling. Why wouldn't LeBron want access to that? Why wouldn't a player who embraced comparison to Jordan seek understanding from the very man who defined the standard? This is not framed as an accusation. It is framed as a missed opportunity. Stephen A. is not saying LeBron needed Jordan to succeed. Clearly, he didn't. But greatness is not just about self-belief. It is also about humility, the willingness to learn, to listen, to recognize that even the most gifted talents can still grow by standing next to those who came before them. Instead, LeBron chose isolation, independence, a path that said, "I will figure this out on my own." That choice may have been rooted in pride, self-confidence, or a desire to build something entirely his own. But it also meant forfeiting the chance at brotherhood with the very legend whose shadow he willingly stepped into. And that silence between them tells a story louder than any statistic ever could. In a league built on lineage, mentorship, and the symbolic passing of the torch from Jordan to LeBron was never formally handed over. Not because Jordan refused, not because of jealousy or bitterness, but because the moment to ask never came. According to Stephen A., this was never about hate. It was about absence, about a relationship that could have existed but didn't. And in the history of basketball, that unspoken gap may be one of the most meaningful parts of the entire LeBron-Jordan conversation.
Jordan's living his best life, and, they're not enemies. But it's not about whether or not or they have a relationship or not. The issue is why.
Kendra Perkins approaches this debate with a level of honesty that often gets lost in the noise surrounding the GOAT conversation. He openly admits that greatness, to some extent, is subjective. For him personally, LeBron James is the greatest player he has ever seen. That opinion is shaped by what LeBron has done across eras, franchises, and roles. But Perkins is also careful to acknowledge a crucial truth. His perspective is not universal, nor should it be treated as absolute. Basketball fandom is deeply emotional. Many fans will always choose Michael Jordan because he defined their childhood. Others will argue for Kobe Bryant because of his mentality, his loyalty, or the way he mirrored Jordan's killer instinct. These choices are often rooted less in statistics and more in connection, inspiration, and identity. However, Perkins draws a clear line between personal preference and historical reality. While opinions may vary, basketball history is anchored by objective benchmarks. Championships matter. Dominance in the biggest moments matters. Defensive intensity, competitive ruthlessness, and the ability to impose fear on opponents matter. LeBron James excels in many of these categories, and his resume is undeniable. But Michael Jordan didn't just meet those standards. He set them. He turned excellence into expectation and pressure into fuel. That distinction is why Perkins frames his stance as emotional rather than historical. He understands that loving LeBron's game does not automatically erase what Jordan accomplished. This is where the tension truly lies. When LeBron publicly declared himself the greatest of all time, It wasn't simply confidence that unsettled people. It was what that declaration implied. To many fans, players, and legends, it felt like a dismissal of the decades of greatness that built the foundation LeBron now stands on. In basketball culture, greatness has traditionally been bestowed, not claimed. Jordan never announced himself as the GOAT. He didn't need to. His dominance made the argument unavoidable. His peers, rivals, and the league itself crowned him through acknowledgement, not proclamation. That is why Jordan's greatness feels organic rather than forced. Perkins seems to recognize that this is where LeBron unintentionally fractured his own narrative. By declaring himself the greatest, he shifted the conversation from appreciation to comparison, from respect to resistance. Instead of uniting fans around his achievements, it hardened opposition and intensified scrutiny. And by choosing not to seek wisdom, mentorship, or dialogue with legends like Michael Jordan, LeBron further distanced himself from the lineage he could have embodied. Rather than carrying the heritage forward, he appeared to challenge it head-on. That choice does not diminish LeBron's greatness, but does explain why the debate remains so divisive. Personal preferences will always exist, and they are valid. But preferences cannot rewrite history. Kendra Perkins is not denying LeBron's brilliance. He is acknowledging that true elevation often comes not from rewriting the past, but from understanding it, respecting it, and building upon it. And in walking away from the opportunity to learn from those who came before, LeBron may have missed a chance to strengthen his legacy in a way that no championship or statistic ever could.
About the greatest player of all time, it's still LeBron James in my eyes. The debate all day. Some people could go with Jordan, some people could go with Bron. Like I told Molly and Stephen A. Before, it's your...
Stephen A. Smith delivers one of the most penetrating observations of the entire debate when he addresses LeBron James' early resistance to mentorship. His point is not rooted in criticism of talent, because LeBron's talent was never in question. From the moment he entered the league, LeBron was clearly a once-in-a-generation athlete. But Stephen A. argues that raw ability alone does not translate into ultimate greatness without guidance. As a young phenom, LeBron had something most players in NBA history never get: direct access to basketball royalty. Legends like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan were not distant figures locked away in history. They were alive, active, and willing to share wisdom with those who sought it. LeBron could have asked how to survive playoff pressure, how to lead when confidence collapses, how to endure criticism without losing edge. Yet he chose not to. Instead of leaning into that lineage, LeBron isolated himself from it. Stephen A. frames this as a conscious decision, not an accident. LeBron chose independence over instruction, self-belief over shared wisdom. That choice shaped the early years of his career in ways people often overlook. His struggles in the finals, his hesitation in defining moments, and his difficulty closing out series were not just products of weak rosters or bad luck. They were also the result of navigating uncharted emotional and psychological territory alone. Championship basketball is not simply about skill execution. It is about surviving pressure that breaks even elite players. That is where mentorship matters most. Stephen A. makes it clear that greatness is not inherited automatically through talent. It is refined through lessons passed down by those who have already paid the price. Michael Jordan did not just win rings. He learned how to suffer losses, how to respond to humiliation, how to weaponize failure. Kobe Bryant actively sought Jordan's guidance because he understood that knowledge accelerates growth. LeBron, by contrast, wanted to create his own blueprint. He wanted to solve problems through experience rather than education. While that approach eventually led to success, it also delayed his ascent and intensified his early failures. The deeper implication in Stephen A.'s argument is humility. True greatness, he suggests, requires the willingness to listen before leading. LeBron's refusal to stand beside the greats as a student prevented him from fully standing with them as a peer. He built his legacy parallel to theirs rather than connected to it. That separation matters in a league defined by legacy, tradition, and respect. LeBron achieved greatness on his own terms, but Stephen A. leaves the audience with a haunting question. How much greater could he have been if he had allowed himself to learn before trying to conquer? In Stephen A.'s view, LeBron did not fail. He succeeded enormously, but he never fully embraced the brotherhood of greatness. And because of that, he stood close to the legends, admired beside them, debated alongside them, but never truly shoulder to shoulder, unified by shared wisdom and earned humility.
Opportunities that you had to be a student and to learn and to grow from those who had already done it was something that you didn't appear interested in doing.
Stephen A. Smith digs even deeper into LeBron James' early years and uncovers what he believes is a defining flaw in the foundation of LeBron's legacy. When LeBron entered the NBA, he did not arrive quietly. He arrived anointed. From high school gyms to national television, the media crowned him the chosen one before he ever played a professional minute. Expectations were not built gradually. They were dropped on him instantly. And to LeBron's credit, he delivered in many ways. He put up historic numbers, carried weak rosters to the playoffs, and proved he was physically gifted beyond comparison. But what he could not do year after year was finish the job. He reached stages where legends are made and fell short. Stephen A. argues that these failures were not merely the result of bad teammates, front office incompetence, or bad luck. Those factors existed, but they were not the full story. The deeper issue, in his view, was LeBron's refusal to lean on the wisdom of those who had already walked the championship path. Basketball history is filled with great players who struggled early, learned from mentors, and then transformed into killers when it mattered most. LeBron skipped that learning curve by choice. Instead of sitting at the feet of champions like Michael Jordan or absorbing postseason lessons from battle-tested peers, he tried to figure it out alone. That decision had consequences. LeBron repeatedly found himself unprepared for the psychological warfare of deep playoff runs. Closing games, embracing pressure, and imposing fear are not skills learned through talent alone. They are taught through experience and often through guidance. Jordan learned how to dominate by enduring failure and by internalizing lessons that shaped his ruthless edge. LeBron, according to Stephen A., chose independence over inheritance. He wanted to create a new way, his way, even if that meant suffering through years of heartbreak. When LeBron finally left Cleveland, it wasn't just a roster decision. It was an admission that his original approach had failed. He went searching not just for better teammates, but for a system, a structure, and a culture that could teach him how to win. Stephen A. sees this as proof that mentorship mattered all along. The irony is painful. The basketball world was ready to help LeBron from day one. Legends were available. Wisdom was accessible. The door was open. But LeBron never walked through it. Instead, he reinvented lessons that had already been perfected. He learned them through finals losses, public criticism, and emotional exhaustion. By the time he figured it out, the cost had already been paid in years, reputation, and narrative damage. That delay is why, when people compare LeBron to Michael Jordan, they don't just compare rings. They compare dominance. They compare efficiency. They compare how quickly each player turned greatness into inevitability. Stephen A.'s final point cuts the deepest. This was never about LeBron's ability. It was about choice. He could have listened. He could have learned. He could have shortened the journey. But he chose silence instead. And that silence in those early years created the very gap that still fuels the GOAT debate today.
And in those early years, when you had proclaimed yourself to embrace these challenges, but then you couldn't win before departing Cleveland.
The story of LeBron James will always be one of greatness. That much is settled. His longevity is unprecedented. His physical dominance reshaped the modern NBA. His versatility redefined what a superstar could be. From a teenager burdened with impossible expectations to a veteran still defying time, LeBron's career stands as one of the most remarkable achievements in sports history. He endured pressure most athletes never experience. He carried franchises, broke records, and stayed relevant across eras that swallowed lesser stars whole. That is not up for debate, but when the conversation shifts from greatness to greatest of all time, the discussion changes. It stops being about accumulation and starts being about legacy. And legacy is not built on numbers alone. It is built on moments, mentality, and choices that LeBron had something no player before him ever had, a living, breathing blueprint for ultimate greatness. Michael Jordan was not a myth buried in history books. He was accessible. He was present. He was the very standard LeBron openly chased. By wearing number 23, by embracing the comparisons, and by eventually declaring himself the greatest, LeBron didn't just invite the GOAT debate. He accelerated it. He made it personal. He made it inevitable. But here is where the divide begins. Instead of reaching out, instead of seeking understanding, instead of humbling himself to learn from the man who had already conquered the mountain, LeBron chose isolation. He chose self-definition over shared wisdom. He wanted the crown without the conversation. He wanted the throne without sitting at the table of kings who had already ruled. Greatness in basketball has always been passed down. Magic learned from those before him. Kobe sought out Jordan relentlessly. Younger stars studied the greats not just to copy their moves, but to understand their mindset. That exchange of knowledge is part of the culture. It is how legacy becomes lineage. LeBron stepped outside of that tradition. That decision didn't make him weak. It made him different, but it also made his journey harder and his legacy more contested. He spent years learning lessons the hard way. How to close, how to dominate without hesitation, how to impose when the moment demands brutality, not brilliance. Those lessons eventually came, but they came late, and they came at the cost of finals losses, public doubt, and a narrative that never stopped chasing him. Michael Jordan didn't need to declare himself the greatest. He didn't need to explain his dominance. He didn't need campaigns or comparisons. His legacy closed its own argument. It arrived complete, finished, undeniable. That LeBron's legacy, by contrast, has always required explanation, context, defense, debate. That doesn't diminish his greatness, but it explains why the door to unanimous GOAT status never fully opened. Greatness is not just about what you achieve. It's about how you honor the road that made achievement possible. It's about understanding that standing on the shoulders of giants does not make you smaller. It makes you taller. That LeBron chose to climb alone. And because of that choice, no matter how many records fall, no matter how many seasons he defies, and no matter how loud the arguments become, there will always be a quiet truth beneath the noise. Some doors in basketball history remain closed not because LeBron wasn't worthy, but because he never knocked.